Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today I'm doing my recap of GenCon 2020. So this was a virtual con since due to COVID-19, the uh, the in-person GenCon convention was canceled, and fortunately enough, it was relaunched as a virtual online experience. And it was a truly great experience from my perspective. So I ran a Gangbusters BX edition game, and I ran it from, scheduled to run from 12 to 4. And we basically ran game time was actually between 12:15 and 4:45. So it ran a little bit longer than I was expecting, but that was because there was just so much role playing going on and so many twists and turns that the players were taking the adventure, and that's really what it's supposed to be about. Is we just had such a great time, and I had to ad lib certain sections of the adventure, and go forward with it. We had very, very little downtime as far as, having to look up any kind of rules or anything like that because the Gangbusters BX edition is a very simplified edition of the original, and it's an OSR product, and this is my second time running it as far as a convention is concerned, and it's a lot of fun. So that's going to be something that I recommend you take a look at. On Drivethru RPG, you can get copies of Gangbusters BX and other games that are also put out by Mark Hunt. So it's a big endorsement from me. I really do appreciate his work on in the OSR with these game systems. He also has a Western as well as some others. So you want to take a look at those. So what I thought I would do is I want to give a very specific shout out to the players that made this experience so worthwhile. And so that goes out to Michael and Alan and Joe and Justin and Colin and Lavelle. You guys were great. So really good chemistry. I know there was a husband and wife, involved in this as well. But we just had such a great time playing, and just so they took it in a very different way than the original group that I ran this game with at CobaltCon. And it was, in some ways better. In some ways, it was just different. But for the most part, I mean, both experiences were phenomenal, and virtually a totally different outcome at the end of this running through the adventure as there was in the first one. So that was really a positive that I wasn't expecting, but I was certainly glad to have. But let's take a look at the adventure that I had written, really quick. And this is something that I'm hoping to make available on Drivethru later on. Now it might come through Mark Hunt himself, or it might come under my own banner. Wait to see over the next couple of weeks where that's going as far as that's concerned. But I'm going to give you a brief look at how this adventure was laid out, and then we'll go from there and wrap up this video. So what I did was it was entitled Whiskey Creek Runs Red, and the runs red part is kind of a play on words. And if you run through this adventure and you'll see the two possible outcomes, you'll become aware of that. But I don't want to spoil that, at this moment. I used actual, historical facts in this for the player introduction. So these are all real time facts. that took place, and I used as much stock photo as I could find. So it was nice that I didn't have to pay for any of these things, and give absolute attribution of the photographs where they were found, all in the archives and such. So that's the great thing about writing about this time period, is that almost everything is public domain, because it is well over 100 years old, at this point. So it's great, or coming close to 100 years old, I should say. So I go through, and again, the players are playing as members of an NYPD police squad, and it's a newly formed motor squad. So they have access the to vehicles, and they also have access to the weaponry and other equipment that was very common to the time period, or so, with some flexibility in there, because the game mechanics actually run through the 1930s. So if you're playing in the 1921 era, I don't want to sit there and research to see, well, when was a flashlight really created? Anything that falls within the game range is fine. But I kind of had elements from this. So the roll call, giving the actual precinct a nickname was something that I pulled from reality, and just from my own perception, or of how police precincts kind of get their nicknames and such. Let's Be Careful Out There is a throwback to Hill Street Blues, if you're familiar with that. Again, stock photos that I found, and they're showing various 1920s police officers and agencies and such that were involved. This is directly from the map of 1920 New York, and I chose the 20th precinct to 20th ward because my daughter actually dances down in this area of New York City. So I'm very, very familiar with New York City. And I placed the precinct houses. You can see where they are. And so this became the player's precinct house that they were operating out of. I created, just made up 3 pharmacies that they would have to investigate, and place them out here on the map, that they had on Roll20 so they could see it. I created the arresting procedures. So this is obviously before Miranda warnings, but they would have certain procedures that they would want the police officers to follow through in order to have having meaningful investigation that was likely to become something that could get a conviction out of. So that was always something that I wanted the players to kind of bear in mind. And they had a lot of fun with this, because they actually asked, can you write this down so that we can kind of pretend that we're going to try to follow it? And so that was really interesting stuff. So these are all game mechanics in the game, and if there wasn't a game mechanic, then I created it. So being on the beat and just a random criminal activity encounter, I actually for convention play, I actually omitted this part of it. I didn't bother with that. We went right to the stakeout, and each stakeout had the potential of several different outcomes. During the stakeout, they had an investigation chart that they would roll on that would give them a plus or a minus on the evidence chart. So the players would roll, and if they rolled, let's say, an 8 or a 9, this result produced a very accurate piece of information. They then got a +1 to their future investigation rolls, a +1 for their warrants, a +2 for the conviction, based on that evidence. So every time they got a modifier here, we would keep track of those things. And in the last group that I ran for GenCon, they actually had a total of a +5, I think, at the very end of the for the conviction stage. The evidence chart. So once they had those pluses or minuses, then they rolled on the evidence chart, and it would tell what quality of the evidence they actually found, including generating rock solid evidence where they really have them down dead to rights. And for the most part, this really played out well. They had very few false positives along the way, and they identified the appropriate wrongdoer, fairly quickly without too many false leads to follow. These are each of the possibilities. So in every case there, in every scenario, there was a multiple ways to either approach it or resolve it. That's something I think is very important for a GM to do, is to, yes, have a framework of what you're looking for it to happen. That's why there's GM notes, and that involves adding and subtracting for possible outcomes, but then having multiple scenarios where there can be something that, based on the player's decisions, could also be possibilities. And you kind of have to lay that out. In each of my two test cases, very, very different outcomes. So in the second outcome, this did not happen. So this whole scenario was changed. They eventually just surrendered, because there was no reason for them to fight in this position. The search warrants, gaining a search warrant, was something that I had to add to the game mechanics, because it wasn't explicitly there as much as I wanted it to be there, and so I added that. And again, when you're a GM and you're writing your own adventures, you're going to add your own little twists and modifications to whatever game system you're playing. Game systems are really designed to give you the basic framework, and then you as a GM are going to take that and move forward. So what leads do they gain from doing a proper investigation and getting that information? Here was a delivery that they intercepted. The second group intercepted. The first group didn't bother doing this step. They really didn't have the timing to do it, or just the thought of doing it. This group here decided to do it. So, like I said, very different experience, same adventure module, two totally different ways of approaching it in many ways. Some more of that period piece photography that was thrown in. What running red actually meant, which the second group didn't get to do this because the second group managed the combat differently in the end. The first group did this. So like I said, two totally different endings for the same adventure. And so wrapping up the case, the first group did not do this. They did not go through the trial portion of this because of the way they wrapped up the last encounter. The second group did go through this portion because of the way that they handled things. And then, of course, I have the major NPCs, some of the minor NPCs to deal with, such as the clerks and the moonshiners and even the dogs, and then the special thanks section, followed by the OGL, and a final wrap up of Gangbusters is a trademark, of Mark Hunt for Gangbusters 1920s adventure, and this is for the BX edition of the game. and so on. And he gives his proper accreditation, and then finally my little ended piece there. So overall, a phenomenal experience. The silver lining to this whole COVID-19 thing that we're all going through is that many of these conventions that might have been not unavailable for you are available through the are available through virtual now. And I really hope that conventions continue to do virtual next year. That'll be phenomenal if they do, because this really I do believe is potentially the future for gaming conventions, is to have the online gaming be a major part of the overall experience. And then for those people who are more local, could travel to the local places without all of the added expenses of airfare and hotel expenses and such, which to me becomes very prohibitive in a lot of ways. So this, I think, is really the wave of the future. I hope it is, and I hope that they continue to have an element of virtual gameplay in gaming conventions moving forward. So once again, I commend everybody that's running Gen Con. You did a great job of organizing it and putting it together, and the ease of setting things up. Although submitting projects was a little bit more difficult than using some of the others that I've done before, but it still was not too complicated. And it was really a great experience. I thank the players that came into today's game. Made it a great time for myself, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well. And for those of you listening to this recap, you know, get involved with Gen Con. It's cheap to buy into games right now, and there's plenty of games that are still open. I wish I had the rest of the weekend to actually participate a little bit more than, but I was glad to at least have this opportunity to run a game at Gen Con, which was a dream come true, and wouldn't have been possible without the virtual setting. It just wouldn't have been, because my chances of getting out to Indianapolis or wherever they're running the in-person convention now is just not something that's on the table for me, at least for the foreseeable future. So it was a great opportunity. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing all of you on the gaming screen sometime soon. That's what this channel is all about, and these kinds of conventions are certainly something that's making it very possible for me to see many people, many new people. Not a single one of these players that I played with today is somebody that I played with in the past. So I just made 6 new gaming contacts that would have never happened otherwise. So you know, have fun gaming out there. Keep it going. Stay safe. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon, too. All right. You have a great afternoon.